I don't rise today, Mr. President, in opposition to COVID relief. Nor do I rise today to oppose money for vaccine distribution and testing. Nor do I rise to oppose stimulus spending for those who really need it, our hard-hit businesses, rank-and-file fellow Americans. And I certainly don't rise to oppose additional grants and loans for other enterprises out there that just aren't going to be able to make it through this, like our not-for-profits that are essential to all of our communities. But I rise today, instead, Mr. President, to oppose this partisan, pork-filled American Rescue Plan. You know, I'm not known for histrionics in this body, and I'm not engaging in them. This is a partisan bill full of a liberal wish list of items that, frankly, aren't popular with Hoosiers, and they won't be popular with the American people the more they get to know about what is loaded up in this $1.9 trillion package of goodies. In the last year, during a time of political division and strife, this Congress came together around COVID relief. We rose to the challenge presented to us by this global pandemic. We didn't bring it on. By most accounts, it came from China. But we came together to address this foreign threat that came to our shores, that's decimated our economy, that threatens lives and livelihoods. And we passed 5 relief measures with well more than 90 votes in every instance. The total, nearly $3.5 trillion. And I make no apologies for those investments. Those were investments in public health. Those were investments in our communities. Those were investments in our employers. Those were investments in our loved ones, to provide them safety and security and a measure of comfort, but to save their very lives. These were investments in our frontline workers. But we did all that in a bipartisan fashion with very little opposition. Very little opposition. Unity. That's what this country needs. I heard that coming from the lips of Republicans and Democrats alike at the highest levels weeks ago, and that's what I pine for. I want our country to be unified. I believe we can be unified. But this is not a step in the right direction. Even though much of the money that we have allocated to address the many consequences of this global pandemic has not been spent yet, we Republicans have tried to work with the Biden administration on a 6th relief package over the past month. In fact, I was one of 10 Republicans who, I say this commendably towards the Biden administration, and specifically, I commend the president for inviting myself and 9 other Republicans into the Oval Office to discuss our counterproposal. Now, I have to say, this $600 billion proposal that we were providing was, for this United States Senator, a bit of a stretch. You know, so much money was still in the pipeline, it wasn't even clear that much was needed. But we certainly did not need $1.9 trillion, and we all agreed upon that. Unfortunately, we sort of left that meeting with a supposition that unfortunately has been substantiated, that there was an intention to move forward regardless of the respectful and fact-based exchange we had about the wastefulness of the $1.9 trillion package and the extent to which the $600 billion package more than met the needs of getting people vaccinated, getting people back to work, and getting our kids back to school as safely and quickly as possible. Here we are, though. Instead of a targeted COVID relief package, we've seen our Democratic leaders load up a $1.9 trillion bill with wish list items. And so here's what I'm going to have to educate Hoosiers on in coming months, because I think they actually believe this is mostly about vaccination and getting kids back to school and getting people back to work, and I wish that were the case. But no, it's about borrowing money so that we can pay for, I think, what can fairly be characterized as a blue state bailout to the tune of $350 billion. You see, a lot of states aren't like the state of Indiana. The state of Indiana over the years has balanced our budget and come up with a rainy day fund, and we were criticized oftentimes for not spending money out of that rainy day fund, but the rainiest of days hit, and Indiana was ready. Not every state did that. Many states have elected leaders that have made unfulfillable promises to their constituency over the years related to their retirements and so forth. And so now in this package is $350 billion going towards those states to be used for purposes other than the pandemic relief. Also in this bill, $1.9 trillion package, is a Silicon Valley subway. I'm not sure how it got in there. I do know that Speaker Pelosi hails from the area. The National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities. I love arts. I love the humanities. We can debate the proper role of government in funding these public cultural goods, but let's do it some other time. Let's not do it in the course of pandemic relief legislation. Expansion of the Paycheck Protection Program to provide loans to Planned Parenthood, forcing certain taxpayers like myself to violate our conscience. Much, much more. It's full of waste. It's fat with waste. This body passed a $1.9 trillion CARES Act in March of 2020. 1 year later, Democrats, along party lines, are poised to jam through another $1.9 trillion package. Now, to give you some sense of how much $1 trillion is, these numbers can be abstract sometimes, but try to visualize $1 bills stacked from the ground halfway up to the moon. That's $1 trillion, I was told earlier today. That's a lot of money. And we're borrowing every cent of it. I think it's important we consider the difference between what we passed a year ago and what we are now considering is likely to pass along party line votes. When the CARES Act went into effect, the nation was shut down. Only so-called essential businesses, businesses that could operate safely, were open. Indiana's unemployment rate then was 17.5%. We've done a great job managing this crisis in the state of Indiana. Most businesses are reopened. The unemployment rate is 4.3% in our state. We don't have the same public health challenges of other places who've shut everything down. I'll let others try and divine why that is. When the CARES Act became law, not a single school in Indiana was open. In Indiana today, most schools are open to in-person learning, in-person instruction, many full-time. And let me take this opportunity to commend our administrators and our teachers in the state of Indiana for showing up for work. We don't see that all around the country. Last week, in more than 2,000 schools in Indiana, there were only 62 teacher cases. I told you, basically all the schools have opened up, only 62 teacher cases in Indiana. That's one case for every 33 schools. I'd say we're doing a pretty good job managing the risk, following the science. When the CARES Act became law, a vaccine was a far-off dream. And I can remember President Trump indicating there'd be a vaccine by year's end. People laughed. Democrats scoffed, mocked. Members of the media mocked him. Not only do we have one vaccine, but then comes vaccine number 2 and vaccine number 3, all in the pipeline because of Operation Warp Speed that the Trump administration implemented to at once streamline the regulatory process for approval and also begin manufacturing in parallel. It's good that the Biden administration is building on those successes. So look, there is no doubt that some Hoosiers and many Americans are still hurting. We can and we will and we must help those people. But President Biden and the National Democrats' so-called American Rescue Plan is not the way to do it. It's just is not responsible. We're better than that. So we who oppose this, we who happen to be Republican United States senators who oppose this partisan effort to use this crisis to advance initiatives like arts funding and a subway next to Speaker Pelosi's district along partisan lines, we're not going to just let this pass and allow the National Democrats to cram unrelated policies into what should be a bill squarely targeted at this crisis. We need a bill just like the 5 bills that we passed in a strongly bipartisan fashion just last year. So today we have more than 1 million Hoosiers who have received their first dose of vaccine, including more than 70% of Hoosiers age 70 and older. There's no doubt that some Hoosiers are still hurting. Again, we'll be helping those folks. So this is really quite simple, Mr. President. We need to work together, Republicans and Democrats, for the good of the country. This does indeed remain a national crisis. We had negative economic growth last year because a global pandemic interrupted the greatest period of economic growth in my lifetime. We need to recover. We're poised for recovery this year. But we need to do it in a targeted, in a fiscally responsible way, and in a fashion that doesn't undermine trust among one another, and one that doesn't break trust with the American people by spending their money irresponsibly. I regret that probably won't happen in the next few days, but I resolve to continue fighting for Hoosiers, for fiscal responsibility, and to constructively work with this administration however we can moving forward. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.